The Author's Corner. It's Tuesday, and today we are interviewing Jacqueline Lulu Brown, who is an author. She's written several books, anthologies, and she's going to be here to talk to us about her books. So, as usual, what I like to do, by the way, I'm Teresa Palmer, I'm the interim host of the Author's Corner. And what I like to do is get the story behind the story. So I like to find out from the authors why they wrote the book, what inspired them to write that book, and what is the message that they are giving to their audience, their readers. So I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline and let her introduce herself.
Greetings. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here today, Teresa. You've already announced my name. And one of the things that I do is write. I am a contributing writer for a couple of different magazines, senior chief and editor for one. And I've been a co author in many anthologies. And I made the decision to, one, start working on an anthology of my own, as well as finally get my own book out there. So, not to go into anything else other than what's specific to authorship, because this is the Author's Corner. The story behind my books. I think you can say that almost word for word, the story behind my books is not a single event. It's a pattern I keep noticing in high achieving women, including myself. And I tend to put that on paper because on paper, very often we look accomplished. In rooms, we look so powerful. But internally, some of us are still negotiating who we really are at our identity. And I think that is one of the driving forces for me. I write a lot about what I have come through. I write a lot about the lessons learned, and I write a lot to serve others so that they don't have to go through the same mistakes that I have made in my lifetime. So as we elevate, and as I have elevated over the years, as I move into those higher dimensions, I find it compelling for me. It's a passion that I must write. I must let others know the, I'm going to say, secret sauce of how we navigate this thing called life, business, career, ministry, community advocacy, wherever you find yourself showing up. Now, I did spend 40 plus years in global high tech executive leadership. I do understand systems, infrastructure, and strategy at the highest level. But I began to realize something through all of that with not only myself, but many women that I worked with, is that we can build companies, but we struggle to build our own internal being, our own internal identity. Thus, I recognize that there are great barriers for women, and it's not because of a lack of intelligence. It's not because of a lack of education at all. It's not even a lack of opportunity in many cases. It is invisible mental conditioning. Beliefs absorbed from the time we came out of our parents, our mother's womb, and our parents' circle. It's family, it's culture, it's faith, it's traditions, it's corporate systems that quietly shape how we see ourselves. That's where my unshackled mind was born. And that is the book that I am working on right now. That is a single book that is full of not just lessons learned and true stories, but it is also full of actions that you can take, the secrets that a lot of people don't really want to get honest and talk about how they came through. That book really is not a memoir. It's not health, self-help fluff, but it is a liberation framework. And I want to say that really clearly. It is liberation framework. It walks women through recognizing where they've internalized limits and how systematically to dismantle them so that we move forward. I often use language such as radical ascension, going into the next dimension, because elevation requires disruption. You can't rise into the next dimension with old internal architecture. And I'm going to pause there and ask me anything else.
That well, what I'd like is the message that you give in the Unshackled Mind. What
Mhm,
is that one message? Excuse me. What is that one message that you tell, I guess, men and women or women?
mhm.
And secondly, give us an example of an exercise or an action step that you give to your readers to help them get over the blocks.
Oh, wow. Great question. Great question. Thank you. The first thing is to realize that our mind was shackled to begin with. People will tend to get very defensive. My mind's not shackled. I know who I am, I know my identity. But when you go below down to the deeper levels, our behavior actually is different from what we say we believe. And so it is taking us back actually to the womb. When we come out, what are those things that are shaping and molding? Because there is this world's systems, there is a shackling that takes place. And that's strong language. Absolutely. Yes, it is. But it is very truthful language when we go down very deep to do the introspective work. So it's going to that core level first. And it's coming into the reality of introspective work, doing the internal examination of, is there any place in my life, in my mind, in my spirit, in my being that I may potentially be shackled? That's the first piece of that. Then it's looking at everything outside that has shaped and molded us over the years. And it's looking and it's questioning every single thing. And some people say, well, you really are going to question everything. Yes, if you want to elevate to those higher dimensions, we are going to look at everything. And a big piece, and Teresa, you're very familiar with this, is our heart. We're going to go in and we're going to start with the heart. What are the things that came into our intellect, into our mind, that dropped into our hearts, that made us who we are today? And then we're going to ask one simple question: who said it and why should I believe it? Maybe you should. Maybe it makes sense. But we are going to question who said it and why should I continue to believe it. From there, now there are steps that we walk through to identify. And I'm going to give you an example of something really simple. I'm going to oversimplify this. Ask yourself what your favorite color is. And I've done this exercise in the Ascend Her Academy and classes. And people will write down, my favorite colors are, and this is a true story, navy blue, brown, and black. And I ask the question, why are those your favorite colors? Be honest. Is it that you just like those colors? Why are those your favorite colors? And One woman said, well, they're my favorite colors is because that is what is always been acceptable in corporate. All my suits are brown, black, or navy blue. Okay, what's wrong with a deep eggplant purple suit? Did you ever think about that? And then, so again, it's a conditioning. Now, here's something totally different that someone said. They said, because black makes me look smaller, it makes me look thinner. Who told you that it makes you look thinner? Well, everybody says it. Well, what makes you think everyone is right? Now, somebody would say, oh, now you're just being ridiculous with these analogies. We're really not. These are things that have shaped and molded us. What if that person doesn't need to look thinner? What is driving the individual to think that they need to wear another color to look thinner versus if you're not comfortable with yourself, why not do something different? Work out, exercise, maybe trim off a few pounds. But to rush to, well, I wear black because it makes me look smaller. Those are very basic, simple examples. Now, there's some deeper ones, and I don't want to give it all away because they have to go and buy the book to get down to the nitty gritty. But can you imagine just some of the most basic, simple things that we've been taught that go into our mind, that go into our psyche, and drop down in our heart and become our beliefs?
Yeah, it's very true. And what you said about the heart, I think the problem is we disconnect from the heart.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm going to really go out on a limb here because even though I work in science, I'm a holistic cardiology nurse practitioner. I
mm-hmm,
blend science with the wisdom of the heart.
mm-hmm.
And I would say that we see a lot of heart problems
Yes.
because that's our body trying to tell us to
Mm-hmm.
connect to our heart. And
Absolutely.
it's like with anything, you get these little tiny reminders, you
Yes.
get these little tiny nudges, and then if you don't listen to it, all of a sudden you get a big nudge. And I think you're right. It's culture, it's society, it's all of that. And I think that once we get past, I'm going to say about the age of 7,
Mm-hmm.
we start listening to everybody else and we
We
don't
do.
listen to ourselves. And I
Right.
think that's our biggest problem.
Now, I totally agree with you. When I look at Teresa, when I look at where my books were born from, and the other piece of it is, and when you talk about disconnecting from the heart, it's from recognizing that high performance does not equal internal freedom necessarily. And that's where the shackled mind comes in. We can be very high performing, we can be go getters, we can be very accomplished, but it doesn't equal internal freedom. And I write to women really to help them dismantle invisible limits. And
I think she froze up here. There she can.
okay.
There she is.
Okay. I'm not sure why I'm freezing, but what I was saying is that a lot of what goes into my books and my writing is to help women dismantle invisible limits and build leadership from alignment instead of survival. Very often, we are in survival mode and we don't always realize it. And we can say, yes, but it's structured. My life is informed by insights. But the book is designed as a system that others can really go deep and apply the questions, thinking through the answers, because there's no one perfect answer. There's no right or wrong. It is what is required for you as an individual. And the first part of that is waking up to the systems and all of the different frameworks that have been forced upon us and looking and going deep to say which ones really fit me and which ones don't. It's about having the conversation with ourselves that some may be ashamed to have in an open room, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. And now I'm going to ask a question. Because you've written a book that isn't mainstream, it's asking especially women to look at themselves. And people may not want to look at themselves. They may be a little bit afraid to look at themselves. Maybe they've never done it. So, how, when you give your presentations and with your book, how do people react to it? And do you get an immediate, oh, this is really good, or this is what I really needed? Or do people look at it and kind of say, what? Or, really? Or any of those things? Like, what's a reaction that you get from people? And do you expect that reaction? Or did it come as a surprise to you?
It didn't come to a surprise to me. And I will tell you, it's automatic rejection. It is not wanting to openly uh, go into the heart. I love the things that you say in many of your other interviews and your teachings around the heart. Teresa, comes back to that. And I'm going to add a word to that: honesty of the heart.
Okay.
Honesty of the heart. And I'll give you an example during a retreat. And we were going through what dimensions we are in. And people were very uncomfortable saying, I took and broke out 5 dimensions and kind of put some context to it for the sake of time, so that people could kind of quickly understand how we are multidimensional beings and how we operate at different levels. And there was a level of uncomfortableness in the room where, some people are just, I really want this help, and I'm just going to, tell me, help me work through this. And then there were others that pull back and, well, that's not really me. And will almost at sometimes, I'll say, challenge what is being said. And that's because this is not easy work that people are going to get out and just blast. I'm going to give you another example. Teresa, very often people wonder when they post on social media why people don't put a like. They've said the most profound thing. Well, sometimes if someone agrees with you and they post that like, they may perceive themselves as, well, I don't want people thinking that something's wrong with my heart. And if you don't mind, I'll use you as an example. You may put a beautiful post out about being disconnected from the heart and being too far into the intellect. And that could be very true for a lot of people, but they're going to scroll by that and they're not going to acknowledge it openly. And so what I have found is that, I'm going to say, honestly, Teresa, all of what I teach, because I am dealing with very high level women. And those are not women that are going to openly say, yep, I identify with that because I've been there before. They don't even have to admit they're there now. But even if they've been there, there are far and few in between that are actually going to say, yes, that I identify with that. So I find that I cannot take it personal as rejection. What I have to do is remain aligned in my heart with my gifting, my learnings, and the genius and the brilliance of what God has brought me through. And that's not to over spiritualize or bring religion into it, but I am a person of faith. And there are some things that I have come through, and it really has been divine intervention, divine revelation. When I said, why am I going through this? What's wrong with me? And I had to go to that deeper level. If it was for no other reason but to come through all of these learnings to be where I am now, that I might be able to help someone else. And I'll give you this one little piece that sticks with me. In the Bible, there's a story about a man named Nicodemus that went to Jesus, and it says he went to Jesus by night. And they call him the secret disciple. He went at night in secret because he wanted to get some answers from Jesus. And so as he's having this conversation with Jesus, and Jesus tells him, these are all the things you need to do. And he says, I've done all those things from my youth up, in a somewhat self-righteous. Okay, so you're telling me, obey the 10 Commandments, do this, do that. But there's always something that we lack. But he didn't want to hear that in an open venue. So what did he do? He went by night. And honestly, I am that person that an individual comes to by night. And I don't mean literal night, but I'm not a person that most are going to come to and say, hey, I heard you speak. I saw this. I heard that. Can you help me with something? Because that's not something they're going to do openly. They're not going to openly sign up for a group webinar or something like that. And I am very honestly telling you, that's a special calling. And I will not tell you that that is not having the ability. You have to have the ability to receive rejection. The work that I do, what I unveil, the core that I go to, comes with a lot of rejection. But that's my purpose. So this is where authenticity comes in. Am I going to remain true and authentic to who I am? And this is not insulting people. This work is not to insult anyone. This work is to set people free to soar and to thrive where they are meant to be without limits. No limitation. The sky is the limit. I don't use that phrase, and I actually encourage people not to, because the minute you say the sky is the limit, people say it's just a cliche. Well, it's a cliche that is words in a container that has power. And the minute you put that out into the universe, you just placed a limit on you. The sky is the limit. Well, no, the sky is not the limit. In the words of a couple of great people have stated this, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, I operate in limitless. These are people that you could not tell them that they were not limitless. It's a mindset.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think one of the things right now, I've been doing some research for a book that I'm currently writing about the heart of change, transformation, and lasting change. And that could only come from the heart. And people are starting to get it because people are seeing that quick fixes don't work. There's really a demand now for authenticity. There's a demand for what is real.
Right.
And part of that, we had a discussion yesterday on the other program about AI.
Yes.
And I think one of the things AI is doing is it's pushing people to realize that they really have to think for themselves,
Yes.
that things are up to them, and that not only do they have a mind, but they are able to function with things, and they can't go to outside people like they used to. Before, you went to your pastor, you went to your local congressman, whatever. You followed that structure. Well, that structure is breaking down. And I think people are realizing that things are now up to them. So when I read that about, quick fixes, that all these self-help books that are out there, there's a booming market. but a lot of people are getting anxious and depressed after reading them. And the reason is because it's giving them superficial solutions. Not that they're bad, but even things like yoga and meditation. You could tell somebody do all the yoga in the world, but unless they do that inner work on themselves and they understand who they are and what they need, that yoga is not going to do much of anything. It's not going to say, okay, even with exercise, you're not going to lose a few pounds. Yeah, superficially. But you look at weight. Why do people lose weight and gain it back? Because internally and I know a lot of people are going to get annoyed at this, but internally, there could be a question of, am I worthy to be this other person? Do I want this change? And when you look at a lot of it, mindful eating, it all starts within you. So I think with anything that if we could look at ourselves first, and then we go to these outside things, we work on diet, exercise, modalities, like even tapping. Tapping does a lot for people, but it's temporary.
Mhm.
It's temporary. And that's what people had a hard time understanding. That you
Mhm.
think because you tap and you do things, yes, it's going to help you at that time. But 8 hours later, the next day, when a challenge comes up, if you don't have that full inner core within you and you don't know who you are, you're going to be very limited with what you could do with all these outside resources. And, when I read that, I was so thrilled to find that, not thrilled that people are getting depressed and anxious for self-help books, but thrilled because people are starting to wake up to the fact that they have to look at themselves. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that because of the way the world is changing, and it's changing so rapidly that outside of us doesn't have time to keep up with that. We have to look to ourselves. We're stuck with ourselves now, and that's a good thing. Whereas before we could just be busy, do other things. Now it's coming back to us. So, any final words that you have to say?
Yes, you've touched so much in alignment with the book. Thank you so much. It's really refreshing when someone sort of gets it, because it's not designed to be mainstream. It's really not. It's designed to be transformational. Mainstream content comforts people, and that's not criticism at all. It's a reality. My work challenges internal architecture. Again, coming from technology, it's how do we understand how we are architected? Do we understand what were the building blocks? And that is extremely important. So I just leave with the audience just these few things. Position is not always creating the perfect category for where someone wants to be. And that happens a lot with writers. This is the author's corner. And I'd like to say to those that are thinking about writing books, think about where your book fits from a category perspective versus where you want it to be because it's going to make bestseller, or the rules that say if you do it this way. Do you want the book to be effective? And do you want the book to change lives? Now, everybody doesn't write for that. So I'm talking to that special writer. My book builds a bridge between executive leadership strategy and spiritual alignment, which is that hard part. It specifically builds that alignment through learnings and stories. And that is why it is not typical. It's different and it's innovative. And I am speaking to an audience specifically for women who are already high performing, but they know something deeper needs recalibration.
Mm.
This is not about condemnation. This is not about having to admit that you're not exactly what everyone else thinks you are. This is about you going deep and looking, where do I need to be recalibrated so that I am operating and I am ascending to the next dimension. Many
Yeah.
movements begin outside of mainstream. Teresa, you have a movement talking about the heart, being a cardiology nurse. And that's a movement that is outside of mainstream medical treatment. But what makes something mainstream is resonance over time, not initial conformity. We're not conforming to everything that the world thinks that we should be, but we have long term vision, elevated framing. And so, thank you for having me. And my book sits at the intersection of faith, executive leadership, psychological liberation. The intersection isn't crowded, but it's necessary. So some may say, oh, well, it's overly. No, it's not overly religious. I didn't say religion. As a minister, believe, and a pastor, believe it or not, I don't use words like religion. I am talking about the intersection of spiritual faith from the heart, executive leadership, and then coming into a psychological liberation. That intersection will never be broad and wide. It's going to be a road where you find a traveler every now and then. But when you find that traveler and that traveler ascends into their next dimension, guess what? We are slowly building a world of effective, not right. I'm right in what I'm saying. I'm right all the time, but effective. I'd rather be an architect, not an influencer, but an architect that helps people become effective. They don't have to always be right. Thank you so
That is
much.
very true. Thank you so much. And again, if who's ever listening to us, I think we got some really good nuggets of not only what it means to write a book, but a subject that you're passionate about. And I think that's what this shows, that as a writer, you're not just writing to write or say, oh, this is a popular subject now, and I can get 30 publishers that may want to have the book, and maybe I'll be a New York Times bestseller. But what you're saying is that I'm writing this book because there are people out there that have this need. And this is what I do. And it's not mainstream, but I do it and I resonate with a certain group of people. So I think that's really what a writer is about. It's different with fiction because fiction you're writing for everybody. But I think when you're writing the nonfiction,
Mhm.
you're writing what's passionate for you. So I thank you for this interview,
Thank
and
you.
we'll have to do this again. So thank you everyone for joining us, and for those that are going to listen to the replay. You got some good information here, some good inspiration. So as always with writing, just go for it. Thank you so much.